Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We're going to let folks come into our webinar today, where we're going to be talking about team culture matters, especially during a crisis. And I know that it's late in the afternoon, and it's one more day down in lockdown, and I really want you to know that we appreciate you being here. So we're going to allow folks to come on the webinar with us. Hello, Kerry. How are you today? He's on mute.
Anissa, hello. I dressed up today.
Yes, you did.
So I put on my coat, but I still have my colleague working with me today.
Excellent. Yeah, I had to lock my colleagues out. I had them in earlier, and the cat just runs past the microphone, and just crazy.
It's like a cartoon, isn't it?
It is. It is. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started. Kerry, if you want to show your deck there, I want to introduce you and our sponsors, and then we're going to talk about what we're going to talk about.
Okay, here we go. I am going to share the deck.
Oh, by the way, we all love the longhorn in the background.
Yeah, depending on how I position it, I get horns or not. It depends on my mood, I guess.
It depends on your mood. So today, I'm very excited to have Kerry Leidich, co-founder of Human Intelligence, with us. Kerry's going to be speaking on team culture matters, especially during a crisis. And before we begin, I just want to say thank you and do a shout out to our sponsors. The Whitmarsh Consulting Group is a group of very distinctively skilled individuals. If you want to switch to that, there we go. There's his smiling face. David Whitmarsh and his team are human resource information technology consultants and multi-channel marketing communication strategy experts. And I just want to say thank you. Without David and his team, we would not have accomplish what we have with leading in a crisis, our virtual summit. I also want to say thank you to our sponsor, HR That Matters, Insperity. Insperity has also graciously offered to provide any member that registers for our talks and participates in our summit with a free HR financial analysis report and debrief. Even if you know that Insperity is not a perfect fit for you, that's okay. They are offering this because they know that many of us are going through massive change in our organization and certainly massive uncertainty, and many HR budgets are completely turned upside down. And as a result of that, we know that our HR friends and peers are going to be looking at what do we need to do to maximize our performance while cutting our budget. And if this can help you, I highly encourage you to take advantage of it. It's turnkeycoachingsolutions.net/HR report, and that HR report is case sensitive, as what you see on the screen there. So next, I want to say a little bit about my team and putting on this Leading in a Crisis Summit. My name is Anissa Avon, and I am the CEO of TurnKey Coaching and Development Solutions. We are a learning and development solutions provider, providing coaching and training and enterprise learning and development solutions. We have more than 1,000 coaches and OD consultants and master trainers across the US and in key hubs globally. And when I went to our team and I said, okay, everyone has seen that what's hitting the fan, what are we going to do? How can we be of service? And in addition to looking for soup kitchens that are not open right now in some cases, we decided, well, let's put on a summit. We've got a lot of really smart subject matter experts that can can share our, and I think the next slide, Kerry, is about the summit. Or is it? Yeah, there we go. We have more than 40 experts that have signed on. We're going to share those talks with you guys free of charge every Wednesday and Thursday throughout April. And now we're scheduling for May as well. So check back often to see who's up next and let us know who you'd like to see. If you have a topic or an expert you want me to call out to, I am happy to ring them up and say, Joe said he wants you here. And give us your feedback, of course. Two very quick packages that I want to talk about. Of course, I don't like pitch fests any more than you guys, so we won't go into detail about this. But we have been asked about our virtual training options specific for the needs of the situation, things like crisis management and managing conflict during times of crisis, and competence, maximizing performance even though you're remote, and business continuity, and etc. So if you have a need, we are doing BOGO, which means buy one, get one virtual training, next best thing to half off. And then we also have put together some outplacement packages. If you're in that unfortunate position of having to have laid off members of your team and you want to provide them with a means of finding employment, we would be happy to help. And it's not free, but it's the next best thing. Name your own price. So Kerry, let's talk a little bit about you and your experience and what we're going to learn today. Go to that. Yeah, I want you, Kerry, to share with us who you are, what makes you the expert on team culture, and what are we going to learn today with our time with you?
Wow, what makes me the expert? You can read a little bit about me in the bio section of the talk, but just beyond that, I've spent about 25 years or so in the human capital arena. Spent the first 15 years of my career with Hay Group, which is a preeminent global HR consulting firm, now part of Korn Ferry. And back then, and this is what I'm giving you a little bit of the origin story of human intelligence. Back then, I did a lot of consulting, mostly in big organizations like Disney and Honda Motor and other large enterprises that you can imagine that are working on culture and performance and optimizing talent. And we would develop, employee engagement survey programs, and we would be able to measure everything that you could imagine in order to predict how to get to more engagement and more performance. What I learned time and again, where engagement happens is right on the front line, right where customers touch employees and frontline managers touch their team members, and how teams collaborate together. And we kept really trying and not succeeding all that well back then around creating solutions that really move the needle in that area. So when I had the opportunity back in 2010 to join up with a merry band of characters, who became some of my best friends in the world, to create this concept of human intelligence, human intelligence is about democratizing professional development for everybody around the world. It's about unlocking those tools that have historically been kept in the C-suite for C-suite leaders to experience and develop and build self-awareness and emotional intelligence and all that awesome stuff that we know is so critical to being successful in your life and in your career, because that's ultimately what allows people to unlock their potential and get ahead in their lives in the way that they want to. So that was a mission, that I could really get behind. With my background in industrial organizational psychology, I brought that subject matter expertise, if you will, to the table with human intelligence, along with a great founder and visionary around, building a software platform to bring these tools to the world, and some financial minds. We created the founding team, and I became the chief product officer and started building this solution with our development team. Now, something else I think is notable around my experience is that I was just thinking about this around the remote work environment situation that people are finding themselves in today. I just realized that I have been working remote. Well, certainly for the last 10 to 12 years, I've worked out of my home office. But even before that, since about 1999, so about 20 years, I have not been in the same office with my boss for over 20 years, and and what does that present as a challenge, to somebody who's trying to manage my performance? I've kind of learned to become quite self-reliant and create my own systems and do it my own way, ultimately delivering results, because that's, what ends up being the thing that matters. But I have a lot of experience in both, living remotely as a remote worker, but also leading a remote team. And when I was the chief product officer in the first 6 years of Human Intelligence, I managed teams across geographies too. Our main development team is in Bogota, Colombia, and we have other developers and designers elsewhere. We were very early adopters of the Zoom technology. We were one of the first probably 1,000 users on Zoom back when it launched in 2012. And we just learned over the years to, make it work as a fully distributed organization. Now we have about 20 people who are all over the place. We still have our development team in Colombia. Our CEO is in Miami, sales folks in Los Angeles and Atlanta, and Raleigh, Durham, and other people in New York. And, it's all over the place. So we're heavy users of the kind of tools and technologies that, a lot of people are now getting exposure to. Zoom seems to be becoming one of those nouns, let's Zoom, just like we used to say, let's Xerox something. And I think it's going to become, that type of technology is just becoming integrated into people's lives. So that's where I'm coming from in my history, both, my personal mission and my experience in my business. So what Human Intelligence is, I'm just going to give you a real quick overview, is that the Human Intelligence platform, it's a software as a service platform. It will plug in typically into the technology stack for human resources. It integrates with any HRIS or any applicant tracking system. And what it does is it allows an organization of any size, from a team of 5 people up to a corporation of 100,000 people, to identify through what we call culture analytics, to measure and understand culture at every level of the organization. Now, as you can imagine, an engineering team, a product development team, engineering team in an organization is different than a marketing team. It feels different to work there. It takes a different set of capabilities. People are wired differently. They're motivated differently. They have a different approach to the work, and the work requirements are different. And so it's appropriate to have a different culture between the engineering team and the marketing team, the HR team, finance and sales teams. So what we're able to do is allow an organization to get granular about that culture for that time and for that, mainly for that team leader, because even in sales teams can be different depending on the leader. And as I mentioned before, we bring this philosophy, and it's actually shown in the science, that performance happens at that discrete team level. Organizational performance, certainly has to be coordinated across an enterprise. That's what we call the big C of clarity around strategic direction and alignment. That's very important. But in terms of execution and performance, it's about the combination of these teams coming together and delivering what they need to deliver for the organization to succeed. We allow you to measure that. And then the next module is what we call talent fit. And this is, as an organization understands culture and sets a target to the future, because it's about understanding where you want to take the team culture to the future, not just understanding it today, but what's missing, on that team culture. What do you need in order to optimize it? You can hire for it, and you can develop for it. And so that's what we call talent fit. It's the recruiting module in Human Intelligence that plugs into the applicant tracking system. It also has a lightweight for small business applicant tracking system. We often find ourselves doing integrations We have a very easy to use API for doing that. And then finally, there's what we call an engagement suite that has a number of tools that all work in combination to sustain those cultural elements that you've invested so much in understanding and developing. One-on-one feedback, building a feedback culture, we know is a driver of performance and a driver of high-performing cultures. Pulse surveys, just understanding where people are. For example, there's a pulse survey that we have right now that is for crisis and remote work. You can pull that survey template up and deploy it and quickly check in, with your employees. And there's a system in there called what we call an action management system. If you're in HR, if you're, in learning and development, it's basically a learning management system that is designed in a specific way to be extremely easy to use. So that's human intelligence. But let's change our focus for a second, take a step back, okay? And this is, and Anissa, I was reflecting on this over the last several days, taking a walk, I was doing some meditation, and I was thinking about taking things for granted, right? And I was, it's so mundane sometimes, I was thinking about, I thought, gee, I need a haircut, but I can't go get a haircut. I could get a haircut. I have some clippers, I have some scissors, but not my ideal, sense of a proper haircut to go to the barber where I go on a regular basis, and they're always open and it's no big deal. So I thought about what else am I taking for granted? And also, if you expand on that idea, what do leaders take for granted? What do businesses take for granted? Now, I'm showing this slide here, which is the movement of the S&P index, S&P 500 index during crises as they're compared as from the conference board in the first 100 days, of these crises, from 9/11 to other crises like the Lehman Brothers collapse. Now look at the COVID-19 trend in the way that the COVID crisis has impacted the economic situation and the position that puts business leaders in when they're having to face this reality. Okay, yes. This is a brand new reality that has come on almost overnight, it feels. And businesses are now scrambling to figure out how do we offboard the right kind of people and do that with, a sincere sense of caring for our employees who've put so much into our businesses. How do we shift our budgets, to just keep the lights on, okay? We have things in business, and, my business is facing the same kind of realities, where there might be certain investment dollars that were expected and taken for granted. That there are people who have shown up for work every day and been able to pay their rent, and now they no longer have a job in the service industry, in the restaurant industry. I know that this is something that we hear a lot about today, and about managing through a crisis and leading in a crisis. There's some wonderful material out there, on that. But to the point about taking things for granted, I think it's a good lesson, because leaders will often take their culture for granted. They'll take their employees for granted, and taking somebody for granted as a team member is an attitude that they should do their job because they're getting paid. Okay, that's taking someone for granted. People have deeper needs, in order to unlock performance and potential of people, we just have to go a lot deeper than that kind of an attitude. And leaders nowadays are being asked to deliver the same, if not more today, in a remote leadership situation with scared team members, uncertain team members, and guess what? The performance objectives haven't changed, and in some cases they've ramped up a bit, so the pressure is on. So I just put this up there just to reflect reality. The other thing about taking for granted I thought about was generationally, right? So over the last 10 years, we've been in a growth cycle. Imagine a 30-year-old manager, fairly junior in their career, who has lived in this economic boom their entire professional career. What does this do, to rock the boat for somebody in that situation? Anissa, I know you and I have gone through, a couple of those downturns.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually optimistic. I don't want to paint a bleak picture. I'm actually optimistic because economically, there's nothing structurally wrong going on here like there was back in 2008 with the Lehman Brothers. So it really is a healthcare crisis and a short-term thing. Now, the uncertainty about it is how the recovery will happen. Will that take a quarter? Will it take 18 months? If things aren't managed properly, it could take longer. And there will be organizations that fail, and there will be leaders that fail, which is why culture is so important right now, to pay particular attention to. Thinking about, again, taking things for granted. This is how I think about the psychology of taking things for granted, okay? Maslow's hierarchy, this is probably familiar to a lot of people who've taken Psych 101 in college. It's the idea that people need to get base level needs met before they can move up to the next level of getting their needs met. So if you don't have air, water, and food and shelter, you have to focus on that or else you won't survive. Once those physiological needs are met, you move up to your safety needs, personal security, employment, resources, health, okay? And once those needs are met, we can start focusing our attention on love and belonging, intimacy, family, sense of connection. And then we move up the ladder to esteem and self-actualization. Now in this economic boom that we've been in, where companies have had resources to invest in professional development, in hiring, in growing and expanding their product lines and adding new customers. A lot of people actually, especially people functioning in those white collar leader roles, are really working at that self-actualization and esteem levels in this hierarchy of needs. But when this crisis happens, just imagine how people just fall down the rungs of the ladder as these situations change. I might have been working as a restaurant server, and working at that esteem level of getting my needs met, respect, self-esteem. I'm in the flow. I'm making money. I'm working toward my goals. I'm paying off my car. I'm paying my new mortgage, and then suddenly I'm unemployed, and I'm suddenly back down to my safety needs. I don't have employment. God forbid I get sick, and I have health needs, and now I'm, working there. Hopefully as a society, we're doing a good job of taking care of everybody's physiological needs around air, water, clean water, shelter, and all those. Some people live on that level, but for the most part, we do live, we're lucky to live in a society that lives mainly at the safety needs and above.
Yeah.
But the psychology of that is that as those lower level needs get met, over time, our brain gets used to that. Our brain gets trained into habits where it becomes out of sight, out of mind. And I no longer am concerned about my safety needs on a daily basis. I take them for granted, in other words. And so when they're not there, it becomes extremely painful and very disruptive and extremely anxiety provoking. And it sets people back. So I feel like this framework as just a very simple way of thinking about engaging with your team and with your team members is very useful for just understanding where somebody's coming from. If you don't understand where somebody is operating, in this framework, you don't really know them. And so our job as leaders of teams is to find this out. It's not that hard to find it out, right? But we need to know. So don't make any assumptions about where somebody is, or don't take them for granted.
Yeah.
About, that these are needs that are met.
Well, and something about this, we're talking about culture matters. And generally up until February, whatever that date was, March 1st, whatever that date was, when we talk about, in our fields, talk about culture development, we are talking about satisfaction at work and engagement and innovation and getting the most out of your team. So we're typically talking about supporting our teams at some of these higher levels. And I really appreciate you bringing this forth, because frankly, if we're still talking about meeting people at these higher levels, because that's what we're typically talking about when we're talking about culture development, then we have completely missed the boat and missed the opportunity. And it's going to come off as insincere or just downright ignorant.
It's going to come off as totally tone deaf.
Yes.
What it's right.
Yeah.
And so as we dig deeper into this, it becomes, okay, cool. We get it. That makes sense, but how do I do that? Okay. As a team leader. Well, if I wasn't a consultant, I wouldn't have a framework to share. Right. So
Look at that. You just happen to have a framework.
Yeah. And what this is now, what this is called the 4 lenses. It's 4 areas of inquiry that a leader can take, for an individual team member and for the team overall. Now, when these concepts are aggregated, okay, it's what we call team culture. So, for example, when you take the motivators being the internal values that people hold, and you aggregate that together, it gives you a picture of what the team's shared values are. And that's a measure of culture on the team. For work behaviors there on the lower left, this is work style. It's actually based on DISC. So if you're familiar with DISC, the work behaviors and the ideal work use a DISC framework. That's DISC. I'm not going to go over that. I'm going to actually look at the human intelligence version of that. But if you want to just reference it, it's how you tend to behave in any given situation. It's based on your self-identity. The ideal work is something that's quite different in the human intelligence framework, because ideal work looks at what's most energizing and fulfilling to you about the work itself. What do you like to do? What types of problems do you like to solve? Do you like to be the team leader or fit in as a team member? Do you like structure in your day-to-day work, or do you like freedom? So there's a different measures that go into each one of these. There's actually 14 different discrete measures, 6 for work motivators, 4 for behaviors, and 4 for ideal work. And then we also have life priorities, which is a big picture view of what's important in somebody's life at that time. It goes beyond work, and it just looks at certain motives that people have that help lend what we would consider more of a qualitative look into the person as a whole. So I wanted to just introduce you. This is one way of introducing myself, is actually looking at my key motivators and behavioral styles. We call personas, and my number one motivator is a persona called the Maverick. I have a motivator for freedom, almost at a clinical level. It makes me unemployable, basically. So I have this need to go beat my drum and do things, follow a personal sense of direction. I really value creativity and improvising and making new stuff, inventing. And then I'm an architect. So I like to take that creativity and I like to channel it into scalable solutions, into solutions that fit frameworks, that can communicate complex topics in a simple way. This is what drives me, so this is what makes me tick. And so that's just a very high level look, at what comes out of this assessment that we have. It's a 12-minute self-assessment that gets at all of these characteristics.
Tell me why though? Why do we need, I love assessments, but yeah. I'm biased. Why do we need this? Why is it important to have this conversation around, ooh, this is my style, what's yours? Tell me, why does that matter?
Right. Let me show you something. I'm going to go into a different page. Let me see here. Oh, sorry. I have to get out of the screen share mode. Okay. I'm going to use a visual aid for answering that question. And I want to use the example of what a lot of people are facing right now, which is moving from a structured office-based work environment to being isolated at home and needing to get work done. Now, what kind of challenges does that present, to somebody who is used to being in an office environment and everything that entails? Access to my manager on a regular basis, process and structure that I don't really need to worry about creating myself, but is created for me, and the ability to connect with people on a very human level, face to face on a regular basis, which is a very deep human need that we all have. Why is it important to understand who has different levels of needs, like that, and who's going to perhaps struggle more in an isolated remote work environment versus somebody who is going to thrive in that environment? So that would be, one way I might frame that question. So as a team leader, what I want to do is go in here. I'm going to take an example, just click through here into this team dashboard, and then I'm going to go into the human intelligence team. And what you can see in the human intelligence team, for each one of these lenses, the behaviors, the motivators, ideal work, as a leader, I get to see exactly who is coming from which style, who might be at risk for conflict, how balanced my team is between stability and change orientation. It just gives me a complete picture on the team dynamics right on one screen. I can also drill down and look at some details, but I want to go over here to this. This is actually a brand new feature we just rolled out, and it's related to what we're offering as our freebie right now, is under the remote work for team leaders. This is a team leader tool where everybody on the team completes this 12-minute assessment, and then the team leader is able to see and you can see here that there's a score for every person on the team, ranked from low, here a 31 for Dan, it's marked in red, down all the way down to the high scores, an 80 for Teresa, 77 for Robin. The people who score in the green are your thrivers in the remote work environment. The people who are in the red are people who may be more challenged in working in the remote work environment. So how do we know that?
Yeah.
Right. And what do I do with that information if I'm a leader?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to click on this actions compare with target. And you'll notice how on the left you can see Dan, and his behavioral profile is outgoing and free form. The target profile for a remote worker is to be more reflective, or what you might think of as introverted. and more cautious when it comes to process and procedures. So Dan, being outgoing and free form, has a higher need for affiliation with people on a regular basis, on a face-to-face basis. He gets energy from that, and that's how he likes to work. And free form, he's an improviser in the way he gets things done. So he can sometimes have a hard time kind of creating systems and structures for himself, right? So he needs some guide rails. He needs some extra guide rails, in order to, be effective in, delivering what he needs to deliver.
So when
that's
you
it.
relate this to, culture matters, what you're really sharing with us is, not everyone's going to have access to the portal, or not everyone wants access to the portal. But what we know is that right now, knowing your people matters.
Exactly.
Knowing if they are reflective and thriving in this environment, and how to support that continuation, or knowing this is really a challenge for them. Are they adapting? What can I do as a leader to help?
Yeah, and my recommendation is, it's not actually to use human intelligence. What I'm suggesting, and my advice to everybody watching, is to use that framework of understanding that people have different styles, different needs, different values. Okay, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It never has been.
Yeah. But
sometimes leaders treat it that way, and they've gotten away with that
right
for a long time, because everybody's in the same place at the same time, and they get the same messages. Now people are scattered all over the place, and it's more of a, person-to-person type of engagement game. You really need to, go understand where somebody is on that Maslow's hierarchy, get level set on that, and then dig into, what do you care about? And how can I, as your boss, as your leader, help you get those things? I may be able to help you problem solve around certain frustrations that you're having. We might be able to do more one-on-ones. If you're missing that connection. Some people love it that they don't have as many one-on-ones with their boss.
Right.
Some people miss it. Yeah. And so understanding those differences, for each team member is really important. And then consider that when you aggregate all of that information that you have, what does it say about your team overall? What are their strengths? And it is about identifying what those team strengths are, because that's what you're going to be able to build upon, in moving forward, in increasing certainty, lowering uncertainty, and making sure that people understand that, the team is aligned, and how they contribute, to that team and its culture, going forward. So it is about understanding it today, and then, setting an intention for the future.
So help me understand, you've done a lot, obviously, of research and a lot of in-depth study about culture and why it matters. And right now, with this remote environment, so one of my takeaways of that is culture, yes, is the collective, but it's also one-on-one, knowing who your team is, knowing their style, knowing what their needs are, addressing them at the level of their needs. That's important to engage employees and foster those good quality management subordinate relationships. What about the team culture in general, though? Everyone's scattered. Lots of folks are experiencing, even if they still have a job, if any of their peers, their mates, their friends have suffered, there is great anxiety.
Yeah.
What's the research say about culture in a situation like this? How do you grab the collective team to foster engagement?
Yeah, let me go to, it's almost like we rehearsed this.
What's funny is you're not the only speaker that has said that, and I want everyone to know we did not rehearse. This was not scripted.
Yeah, no, exactly, which is great. Okay, So this pivot to remote team leadership, we've looked at it upside down and backwards. Okay. And there are some key themes that come out, that show the things that make a difference. Now, once you have established, there's plenty of material out there, and it's really good stuff about how do you create a workspace that's separate from your living space? How do you create a routine for yourself? Get up in the morning and get dressed, walk around the block, then go to work, wrap up your day at 6 o'clock and put it away, move away from your workspace. There's a lot of practical and tactical advice about how to do that in the physical environment. Also technology. Hopefully by now, as over the last month that people have made the transition, they're up to speed on Zoom. They're up to speed on their collaboration tools like Slack or Microsoft Teams. They're getting comfortable with that. All right. And now we're kind of settling in to what can the leader do now to maintain that engagement? We're now past that lower level of the hierarchy. Can I find the bathroom, and can I get connected into the network? And those are lower level practical needs. We're now past that.
That's important though.
We're now moving up the ladder, and we're trying to now move to collaboration, effective communication, and optimizing performance in this new reality. What we find is, one thing is about just the mindset. So establishing a new job mindset is really helpful. What that means is admit that you just haven't done it before. Admit that there are things to learn. Remember, and we've all been there and done that new job where you don't get invited to the meeting because they forgot about you. You're still trying to figure out where all the files are. You're trying to figure out what meetings you're supposed to be in. When we're in a new job, we tolerate that, and so putting on that mindset will go a long way just for your mental health. Just don't expect, IT to get back to you right away. They're swamped, those kinds of things. And I have to actually give credit to a great writer and speaker named Lori Rudiman, who has a wonderful podcast called Punk Rock HR, the Punk Rock HR podcast. I'll just put a plug in for that. Fun podcast. She covers really relevant topics, and it's actually something that she described that I thought was really insightful. Second thing is, it's proven, now this is true all the time, but it's particularly true in crises, that empathy is number one. This is very difficult to do, okay? Because as leaders, team leaders, we're all facing our own uncertainty and our own fears. And it's really difficult to be empathetic when you're being triggered and you're dealing with that level of stress, and your stress hormones are up more than ever. So being able to take care of yourself and being able to show up for your team members in a way for both the team overall to communicate, and to show up for team members individually and be empathetic and practice empathy. Now is the time to practice that skill. And it's difficult to do right now. We all have to acknowledge that. It's also, if you don't have it, it's also really difficult to develop over time. It's probably the most difficult competency, if you will, to develop. But get to work on it, is the advice. The other part in the research, it shows that you really need to increase your one-on-ones. By how much?
Wow.
3x.
Some people are going to fall over themselves thinking that that's a true statement. First of all, we've got managers that even before this, they would say to me, I get that you're telling me that a one-on-one on a regular basis or weekly basis is important, but I don't have time for that. And if I started that, my people would think, what's wrong with me?
Right.
So you're saying the research is showing that in a remote environment, and especially right now, 3 times increase in one-on-ones.
Right. So if you're having a weekly one-on-one, do it 3 times a week. And maybe they're shorter check-ins,
And they can be, they should
but
be at
they're
times.
more frequent.
Okay.
Sometimes people check in. Some people need a daily check-in, and that's where the tailoring to the situation comes in. You have to understand what somebody needs. It's not just everyone gets a one-on-one once a week. It's who needs what, and who needs extra support and who can be left alone. And you have to be flexible about that. The other thing that we found is in all areas of business, HR is especially looking at this more. It's very common in engineering, using agile methods, but using agile methods in managing your team. It creates, and I'm not going to get into, exactly what that means. There's a whole body of resources around this, using daily stand-ups at 8 a.m., where it's just 5 minutes of somebody says, what am I working on today? Okay, great. Scrums every week, or, twice a week. There are different methodologies about what meetings are done for what, to keep everybody on track with their work, and what needs, and identifying where those interdependencies are in the work where collaboration is required. The agile methods really help you get a handle on what that is, where you could have used a much more fluid, intuitive kind of approach in your approach to managing the work when you're in the office with everybody there. So the agile methods really will come in handy. The last thing is to do not assume that everything is going to go back to normal. Really pay attention to what is going to be happening coming up in 6, 12, 18, 24 months from now. I thought this was really interesting. Gartner just released a study that they did in the first week of April. They surveyed CFOs, and they're asking about remote work. And the CFOs said that it was something like 80%, I think 75% of organizations are planning to keep people remote permanently, at least a segment of their population, depending on the company, between 5 to 10% of the workforce, they'll continue to keep remote. What the CFOs are discovering is how much cheaper it is for people to work from home. Mm-hmm. Now, on the flip side of that, when people, it's first appealing for people to work from home, but over time, it can be difficult. And what another study found was that when people were offered the opportunity to work from home, half of the people took that opportunity. 9 months later, when they were offered to come back, half of those people opted to come back.
So that's only a 25% of the workforce in that particular study.
Exactly.
That ended up, this is for me, it's my thing.
Right. And so reflecting back on what I was showing, in the remote work scorecard, there are going to be people who are more psychologically suited to remote work than other people. And being able to understand those predictors not only allows you to, coach and help, people along when they find themselves in that situation, but can also help figure out who might be the best person to add to the team the next time you need to add somebody to the team, especially if that person needs to be in a remote role. You'd be wise to pay attention to some of those characteristics when you're looking at candidates, that you're going to be putting into remote roles, because those do take a special mix of characteristics to really thrive. And what I'm talking about when I say that is, the ability to predict the success of somebody, once they're selected and put into that role. So there are, psychometric measures that you can use that add predictive power in that process of selecting people and then developing them.
So you're speaking about that in an effort to inform your talent strategy. So during the interview, confirming that those predictable things, because obviously there will be people who don't show up green in the data, but perhaps are used to working in a remote environment or thrive in it, perhaps.
Right. Yeah. So take that case, if I was talking to a candidate and they showed up, let's say in the red per se, on that remote work scorecard, and they had zero experience working remote, I would proceed with caution.
Yeah, that's fair.
Now, somebody who has just been working remote and has made the adjustments and knows how to do it and loves it, regardless of how they score on that scale.
Yeah,
you're probably in safe waters.
Okay, that's very helpful.
So with that, that's really kind of, I don't know, you can tell me if we're on time.
Yeah, I want you to share with people the generous offer that you guys have set up for participants.
Right. Well, we as a team got together and we really put our heads together around what it is that we could do to put out there for organizations, especially for organizations that simply aren't in a position to do any purchasing. And that's a lot of organizations right now. But as I mentioned before, the mission of Human Intelligence is about democratizing professional development and making these tools available to everybody. So that comes first for us. What we've done is we put together an offer for a 90-day Human Intelligence trial. It's called Human Intelligence for Teams. You can have any number of teams, any number of team members, and we'll bring up a branded company portal that's private to your company. You can put your team leaders in there, your employees in there, and depending on what you need, we'll spend some time getting everybody up to speed on how it works, and training your administrator on making sure it can get launched. We have a customer right now that is next week going out to an 1,800 employee workforce to get these remote work scorecards into the hands of their leaders and all of their employees, because they see the value and the timeliness, of those insights right now. I didn't dig into some other tools and insights and recommendations that were in that part of the product, but if you do want to take us up on that, certainly drop me a note on email, or you just go to humanintelligence.com. There's an easy way to find out. There's a little chat bot in there called the Culture Bot, and it just says, do you want to get a 90-day trial? And you say yes, and then you'll be on your way.
Perfect. Excellent. Excellent. Well, if folks on the call, if you have any questions, do let us know, but we do appreciate you guys being here. And how can they reach you, Kerry?
You can reach me at Kerry at humanintelligence.com. That's Kerry at humanintelligence.com. It's shown there on the screen. Think about it as human intelligence, but without the IN. A lot of people miss that part. And or you can reach me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Kerry Leidich there. Or you can just give me a call at 925-922-4637. I'm always available and would love to help you with whatever your challenges are on this front.
Great. Really appreciate it. Thank you for bringing your expertise forward. Do reach out to Kerry, or do reach out to TurnKey. I'm happy to put you in touch with Kerry. Just a couple of things we want to mention again. I mentioned earlier a little bit about our name your own price outplacement services. You can reach me at Anissa at TurnKeyCoachingSolutions.com or 281-469-4244. Again, come back to the Leading in a Crisis, Actionable Strategies for Business and HR for Navigating Crisis and Change, as we bring on new speakers, and let us know what you think and what we can do a better job at. All right, Kerry, thank you so much. Did a fantastic job. I really appreciate you sharing with us.
Thank you, Anissa. It's a pleasure.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe and healthy.